In today's episode, we're going to talk about the most common reasons that deals bust. And that's something that we deal with on a weekly basis, helping agents navigate through some of the turmoil in the transaction. And we're going to talk about why that happens, how to fix it, and how to get ahead of it. So going to be a great episode. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Agent Bridge podcast. I'm Brandon Baca, Marine Corps veteran and 15-year realtor, broker, and coach.
And I'm Marl Hessen. I'm a Fortune 500 C-suite executive, real estate investor, and entrepreneur.
The Agent Bridge is the proven path to real estate success without the burnout. All right, episode 29, Don't Bust Your Deal. Some of the common client misunderstandings, false expectations. I'm going to start that over. We're just going to roll with it.
Okay.
So we're real here, okay?
Yeah.
We do some bloopers, but we're not going to do that one. So anyway, common client misunderstandings and false expectations. I don't know whether it's a working title. We'll figure it out. Anyway, before we do that, like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much. It's been great. It's been so fun to do this podcast and to get your feedback and to have your interaction. And so please, the more you guys talk to us, the more fun it is. But also it helps us give some guidance on what we're going to talk about each week. So please do that. Like, subscribe. Oh, one thing we need to do, if you guys wouldn't mind, give us a rating. We haven't gotten a rating in a while on Apple Podcasts or Spotify that I can see.
Yep.
So wherever you watch this, whether it's YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, give us a rating. Do us a huge favor. We would appreciate it. Okay. But before we get into all of this stuff, we need to talk about the market update because we had some new information. On the last episode, we were waiting on information to come up.
Yeah.
And we've got the information, so let's talk about it.
Yeah, rates did shift a little bit lower. Conventional held a little more sticky than I had wanted, but FHA rates came down. Have a client I'm working with now. We're looking at like a 5.6 something on the FHA side. And it's not like a pristine deal, meaning they're not putting 20% down or anything like that. So it's still, that's a solid rate. I was happy with that. I think that we might see them creep down a little bit more over the next week and a half. But for right now, that's pretty solid. Like I said, though, conventional is still a little higher than I had wanted to see.
Right. But I don't think, honestly, over the length of my career, 15 whole years, by the way, I like to brag about that anytime I get a chance. In my time, I see shifts between what type of loans are used in different markets. So when I first started, we were doing FHA all the time. I mean, that was the majority of what we were doing. Then it switched to conventional. So, you kind of just go back and forth on these types depending on what the market's doing. So, we had a client, they're like, how do I want to do FHA? And there are different, things about each type of loan, but there ain't anything wrong with an FHA.
Nothing wrong with the FHA. People, it's there's some misconceptions about it. People think it means first-time home buyer. It doesn't mean that.
Doesn't mean that.
People think that it's a subprime product. It's not the case either. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
What's the loan limit for FHA right now?
It's different by county.
Okay. Oh, that's right. It is different by county. Cool. All right. So let's go back to the content here and not bust your deal, or how to not bust your deal. Again, these are things that we encounter all the time, and we wanted to kind of like, hey, agents need to know how to solve these problems when they come up, and also how to get ahead of them so they don't become problems. So let's start there, which the number one thing is just communication with your client about how the process works. And because what you don't want is for your client to be surprised by how much something costs. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, can I say that the last 2 or 3 episodes, I think it's 3, the buyer consultation has come up.
Yeah. So
it's clearly important. You have to do it. And it just keeps coming up as something that is a part of every process. So just make sure you knock that out.
I actually, on my listing consultations, I actually like to take paper with me, so to show them, like, so that they can reference how the deal works or where they are in the process.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So that way there's nothing unexpected, or they're not asking me all the time, like, well, what comes next? What comes next? It's like, well, it's all there. Just kind of follow the steps on the piece of paper.
Yeah. Keep in mind too, though, it's market specific. So multiple offers, we may not have talked about this, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. but we are now. And, so you've got to keep up with what's going on in the market. Like you may not have to talk about multiple offers in certain market situations, but now you do.
Right. The other thing is there is no deal that's not going to have complications. You're going to have to solve, and your clients need to know that. So one of the things that I would always say is like, hey, you've got a ton of humans that are going to be interacting with this file, something like 30 to 35 humans between underwriters and processors and realtors and showing assistants and all that stuff, right? So there's a high probability that something's going to go wrong. So if I can fix it without you knowing about it, I will. If you do find out about it, something that we have to adjust, don't freak out. We're going to solve it in most cases. So it's just the expectation that, hey, something's going to fall through. There are going to be some freak out moments. It very rarely goes just perfectly from start to finish. You're going to have something that's going to pop up.
Yeah. I mean, that's really important to talk about. It's important for first-time home buyers, but really everyone, but first-time home buyers especially, because they think like it's a big transaction. Everything should go perfectly smoothly each time. And that's just not the case. I mean, and sometimes things seem much larger than they are.
Yes.
Like it's an issue that you need to resolve, but it's not, world ending or anything.
Right. And here's why, okay? You want to communicate all this stuff. If you don't, there's going to be a high emotion, you have a chance of a high emotional response from your client. That could take you down that path of having, a high level of emotion, and it's just unnecessary. Because if it's unexpected, then they're just going to go, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart. What are we going to do? Then you're down these hypothetical rabbit trails. It's just better if you're telling them, it's like, hey, stuff's going to go wrong. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you can't get sucked in. Got to be the voice of reason.
So yeah, don't get in your client's emotional space. You've got to be above it. You've got to be steady. You've got to, one of the things that I like to say a lot is, hey, that's normal.
Act like you've been there.
Act like you've been there. That's right. Sometimes, and I would say especially, as we're getting into a market where more first-time home buyers will be there, or people are bringing all the cash that they have to get into the market, they need to know how much everything costs. So you need to tell them that inspections cost money and that they're going to have to do earnest money, and we might have additional inspections. And then if we bust a deal because of an inspection result, we'll talk about that later, and we get a new house under contract, we got to pay for inspections again. Yeah. So you don't want them to be surprised that things cost money.
And just because you can get your earnest money back doesn't mean you can get those inspection dollars back.
That's right.
And appraisal too. I mean, we could talk about that in the lending section, but appraisals cost money out of pocket, and people sometimes don't know that. So I usually try to tell them that up front, like, hey, you're going to talk about you, and your agent can tell you this too, but as a lender, I say, hey, you're going to pay for inspections out of pocket, you're going to pay for appraisals out of pocket, and you might have some additional inspections on top of that you're going to pay for out of pocket. You can't roll that into the loan. So it is good to talk about. Most people don't know that, and they feel nickel and dime because each person's like asking, hey, can I have the earnest money now? Can I have the inspection money now? Can I have the appraisal money now?
Yeah, I've run into situations like that where people were just surprised, like, oh, I didn't realize that this was going to cost money. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. But, you can't assume that people are going to know about it.
I always talk about the appraisal one specifically, like, hey, you're going to be asked to pay for the appraisal before we can order it. Just know that. And if they forget for whatever reason, I usually have some lender dollars I can give, not out of my pocket, but it's like a bucket of dollars I have that I can give in certain situations where somebody says, hey, maybe I forgot about the appraisal or whatever. I can apply it to the loan or whatever. But a lot of times people either forget or weren't listening or just didn't know.
Right. Again, it would be good to have like a printout so that people can keep so that they know it's all there in front of them. This is kind of a one-off, but I did want to talk about it, which is that if you have a client that's coming into the market with cash, a lot of times they think that means that they can get a better deal. And that's not necessarily the case. Does cash carry some weight? Yes, it does, especially if you're in a market where we've got maybe like we're pushing the boundaries on appraisal, appraised value, things like that. But in a general like market, when somebody says, "Hey, the house is $350,000," well, I'm going to offer $340 cash. Well, no, they don't care that it's cash. They want the price for their house, and so if you've got someone that has a lender and they're offering the full price and you're offering 340 or 10,000 under and it's cash, they're going to typically go with the higher offer.
Yeah, there usually needs to be some other factor involved too. Like if it's cash, the seller would need to value cash and a quick close or something else. Like it needs to be something else on top of it before they're just going to take a lower offer.
Right.
Like or maybe the offer that they have on the table is like they're not super solid buyers from a financing perspective, and maybe they feel a little uncomfortable about that. But it's usually not just cash that's going to allow you to come in 10,000 under and win.
Exactly. Okay. Number 2, uncommunicative or inexperienced agent. Okay. So by the way, this is going to happen. You are going to be working with an agent on the other side of the deal that is one of these two things. They're either too busy, they're not really great with getting back on stuff, or they just may not have any idea what they're doing, and they don't have the mentorship and training that we provide on this program. But it's going to happen. You're going to run into that as a part of this deal. And the number one thing that I'm going to tell you is to lower your expectations. That's where I find that agents have this like high level of frustration is they get into these situations and they're expecting this person on the other side to be highly professional, and then they're disappointed when they're not. And so you need to understand that there is a spectrum of agents in terms of, or a spectrum of professionalism with agents. And so don't come in there with this just super high expectation that they're going to do everything right, because there's a high likelihood that they are either, like I said, inexperienced. They may not have, a mentor that they're working with that can give them guidance. They may be firing blind on a lot of that stuff. So yeah, number one, just lower your expectations and have a little bit of empathy. If you can put yourself in a position, depending on, where you are in your real estate experience, you may be able to put yourself in a position to get on the same team with them and help them. And they might come to you for advice on something. That's okay. And that's normal in some of these scenarios if you've got someone. So it's like the more, don't be adversarial, be cooperative. And the more cooperative you are, the more likely this deal's going to go smoother.
Yeah. Usually you'll know like kind of early in the process as you're talking through the offer situation or what, if they're going to be responsive or not. If they're not, I usually ask at some point early on, like, hey, do you have a transaction coordinator I should be copying on some of this stuff to try to get things moving? Because usually that's where things get stuck. Like you need signatures. They're not getting back to you. You need answers for your clients for whatever reason about the property that wasn't, disclosed. You have a couple things that they want to know, like those, and they become a middleman or middlewoman. And it gets hard to get information. So it's like, do you have a transaction coordinator I should be copying to get things moving?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things that one of my very best agents says, she always tells the agent on the other side, I'm excited to work with you. And just that friendly encouragement can potentially shift that relationship with the agents. Like, hey, I'm excited to work with you. Like, be friendly with them and again, get on the same team. And that's going to help you guys solve these problems together. So, look, the reality of it is it's likely to happen, but the more you guys can get on the same team, the more smoothly this is going to go and, help pull the deal together.
Yeah. For agents like this, I usually try to lump things together too. Like if my client has a question about whether or not that they're open to the fridge staying or something, I don't onesie twosie them with different questions. They like to lump all these together. Like, hey, I have these 4 questions. Could you go back and get answers? So you're not just constantly asking them for something.
Exactly. Okay. I'll let you take this next one.
Financing.
Yeah. You had the fall through of the financing.
Yeah. So this is obviously a deal killer. Probably, I would say the most common is financing falling through. It can usually be traced back to someone who didn't do a thorough job on the front end, getting a really good pre-approval or working with a good lender. Not always, though. I mean, there's things that can happen to great lenders where financing still falls through. But to start it off, I would say using the wrong lender is typically what causes this problem, because they don't do the due diligence up front. They don't verify income. They don't verify, what's in the bank, things like that. And they just started off with not some information that's been thoroughly checked. And so when you get further in, underwriters are, nicking things out, and they're saying like, all right, you're not approved.
One of the things though, I like to do, if I'm on the listing side, and I don't know the lender, on behalf of my sellers, I typically want to call and talk to them and just establish just some friendly communication. Be like, hey, just want to make sure, saw you're the lender on this, and tell, how are they looking? Right now, they're not going to they can't give you specific details, but they can at least give you some, solid assurance that things are going to move the right direction, going to work out.
A lot of people don't know this, but every bank or every lender actually looks at income a little differently. So if you get a DTI number from me and then Brandon's a lender, you go to Brandon and you give the same information, they may apply a couple of what they call overlays from that bank a little differently, and you may wind up with a different DTI number.
Okay.
So it's not as cut and dry as it seems because there's so many different, and we'll get into this. I'll just go to this one first.
Yeah.
Unique pay structures. A lot of people get paid W-2, and it's very simple, and you get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and at the end of the year, this is your amount, and that's fine. But you have a lot of commission structures that are unique. You have a lot of like regional structures that are unique, and every bank's going to apply their overlay differently. What I like about the banks that I work with is they have internal underwriting departments. Mm-hmm. Before I even give a pre-approval letter, if we have enough time, sometimes I have to shoot out one as quick as I can. But if I've got time, I can ship all those income documents off to underwriting department before we're ever even under contract, and they can give me, this is what we are going to use for the income amount.
Yeah.
And that's huge, right? Because you're like, it's already gone through underwriting. There's nothing that could go wrong. Like, unless we find something that was not disclosed, like a tax lien or something crazy, it's all done. Like, we're good. So a lot of that is just, it's having a good lender that's got good resources that can give you a solid pre-approval letter, and then you're usually not going to have any issues after that.
Most really good lenders that I have worked with in the past, they're typically ahead of the game. Like, they're not waiting. So they're not typically issuing a pre-approval before they've kind of done some, at least a little bit of underwriting work, or at least they have the knowledge and experience to know what's going to get flagged in underwriting. And so they kind of get ahead of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another reason, you just really want to work with great lenders on the buy side. And, if you're on the sales side, it does need to be a point of conversation. Who is the lender on this and how are they, and then I will even reach out and give them a call, not to pester them, not to be a jerk, just to kind of get a feel for the deal.
Yeah. But some of the big things that usually come up are like, people think that because it wasn't on their credit report, it's on their spouse's credit report, but their spouse is pulled off, that it's not going to come up in underwriting. It is, because they're going to look at bank statements and they're going to see the payments going out. Doesn't matter that it wasn't on your credit report. They're going to start asking questions, or they're going to think because the tax lien's not on their credit report, then nobody's going to find out about it. They will. They're going to find out about everything. Everything's going to be visible. Underwriters miss things. They're humans, but most often you just need to be upfront with your finances straight out of the gate.
Yeah, you're not hiding anything, right? It's like they're going to find it, I promise you. So, if your client thinks that they can kind of fly in under the radar, and this is a thing that I'm going to talk about with my clients in the buyer consultation is, hey, like, you're going to be financially filleted in a way. They're going to know everything. They're going to be reviewing bank statements. So if you're trying to hide something, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. The other heartbreaker, and usually, again, this should come up way up front if you're a good lender, but if not, then it could cause a deal to fall through. But self-employment. So self-employment's always a unique one. First, we need 2 years of history. We're going to take the average of the AGI over 2 years, and that's going to be the income number. Most people think it's the total amount that they grossed, and they've written off all these expenses, and the AGI number's way lower. So like, wait, what do you mean I only made $30,000? I brought in 200.
It's all about that AGI number at the bottom right. So, what did that come in at?
Yeah. Adjusted gross income is where it's at for self-employed. And I, depending, I mean, there might be some portfolio loans or some bank statement loans that allow you to go kind of against these guidelines. But for me, it's like you need 2 years tax returns with the self-employment income, and the AGI number averaged over the 2 years is what we're going to use. Most people don't understand that, and they think their income's way too low, but that's just that's the case.
Yep.
We already talked about unique pay structures, but there's so many out there. I've run into like even ones that I couldn't have imagined. And those are the ones, like I said, I just ship them off to the underwriting department and say, hey, what are you going to use as income here? Because this is odd. And they'll just come back with a number, and then you're good to go. The last one I would say is rate fluctuation. No one has a crystal ball. no one knows the perfect time to lock in for every scenario. I don't
Right.
care if they tell you they do or they don't. Some people, it's a misconception that everyone locks the very first day they're under contract. Not true.
Right.
That is should be and is a decision that you make with the client. It's a discussion. So you say, hey, we could lock today. We can lock pretty much. I can lock any time up to around a week and a half out from close, maybe 2. But you can lock at any point in time in that window. It's just when do you think it's best for your client? But it's a discussion, right? It's not just an automatic thing you do when you're under contract. Sometimes you miss a good window, like we're like, hey, we could have locked on Monday, but then rates fluctuated and, they're higher on Wednesday, but, they're getting antsy and they just want to know the rate. So you got to lock. But I've seen it to where we had a major fluctuation and, it gets to the point where, they're like, I don't know if I want to move forward anymore. And
It's possible.
It's possible. And it's like, I kind of told you we probably should have locked on Monday, but now we're sitting here on Wednesday and rates are, 0.5% higher. We should have locked. So it could be a big deal.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so the other one. If your appraisal comes in low, that stinks, by the way. That's never fun because now we've got to go back because we've already, done some negotiation in the front end. We probably have negotiated inspections and repairs. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you're going to have to negotiate again on a low appraisal. Like, what are we going to do? And there's a whole spectrum of solutions to this. What I can tell you, though, is if most of the time, if you're kind of getting ahead of it, the appraisals aren't going to come by like way low. Now, I've had a couple of them where they're like 30,000. Okay, that's crazy. And I've had some where we've completely killed that loan, started over with a new loan, and got it to go through. But it's probably going to come up at some point, and then it's like, well, how do we negotiate? So they're typically not going to come in 30 and 40 and just like big numbers.
If they do, that's almost on the agent.
Right.
Like the agent shouldn't have allowed their client to offer something that's going to be that off from the actual
Exactly.
stated value.
Yeah. So, but you can. There's a few different solutions. Number one is the buyer could pay out of pocket for the gap, right? So if it's $350 purchase price, the appraisal came in at $340, the buyer could pay $10,000 out of pocket. Okay, so that's a possible solution. The other possible solution is that the seller could come down to that purchase price. So they would just lower the purchase price of their house, which I saw a lot of that in previous markets where the seller just had to match the appraisal amount.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I would say that was almost the default. It's like they would just
come down.
Yeah, they would just come down.
And then there's halfway. The seller could come down, like let's say it's $10,000. The seller could come down $5,000 the purchase price. The buyer could pay $5,000 out of pocket. So there's any of those things are possible. But again, you don't want it to be a surprise. Talk with your clients about what that looks like, and don't let it bust the deal.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a way to solve these problems. It just depends on how willing the buyers and sellers are to work with each other.
But I would say, in low appraisal situations, most of the time I feel like we're able to work them out. It can kill the deal if people are surprised by it, but most of the time we find something. We find a solution for it.
Yeah.
Okay. These are coming back. We hadn't heard about these in a long time. As a matter of fact, I had a ton of agents that were like, what is this and how do I do it? And that is a home sale contingency. If you don't know what that is when...
then you've been in the market less than 2 years.
You've been in the market less than 2 years. And that is when, let's say I'm the buyer and I'm buying a house, but I need to sell my house first to get the funding available or to get the cash to put down on the next house. I'm using my equity, and I need to get this house. I need to not be an owner of this house to purchase the next one. So yeah, home sale contingency, and you write that in the contract. So it's contingent upon the sale of the buyer's property.
Yep.
Now, there's a whole spectrum of that. So that house could already be under contract. It could be listed and not under contract, or it could be not listed yet. And all of those things need to be considered in a home sale contingency because it's like, okay, because they said, hey, it's contingent on the sale of their property. Hopefully the realtor has written in what stage it's in. But typically, if they didn't, I'm asking them, is it under contract or is it listed? And if it's not, when is it going to be listed? Is it under contract? Great. Where are you in the contract process? Are you guys past inspections yet?
Yep.
Or did you just now get it under contract? So I'm typically asking questions to get very specific on where that property is in the stage of being sold. So you need to know that.
I usually don't like writing these on the buyer side unless they are going to, if they don't have your house listed already, it's going to be listed within the next 3 to 5 days.
Yes. It needs to be listed super fast.
Super fast.
The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a timeline on the contingency. So I'm not going to do it like forever. It's like, because I don't want my clients to be tied up on the sale of a house or that they can't get it back on the market because that house hasn't been sold. So typically what I'm doing is putting depending on the state of the market, again, the temperature of the market, I'm putting anywhere from a 7 to 14 day timeline on that contingent offer. So it's like basically if they don't have it under contract by this date, then we're going back on the market.
Yeah.
So that's put a timeline on it. And then the other one, and this is something that I've seen agents not do, which is a mistake, is that you have a kickout clause or a first right of refusal. So that means if someone else writes you an offer on the property, so you've got it under contract with this contingency, but that contingency hasn't been removed yet, and somebody else comes in and they want to buy it, the people that currently have it under contract have anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to remove the contingency and move forward with the purchase of the house, or we're going to accept this other contract.
Yeah, and there are a number of ways that they could do that. They could HELOC their current property, use that to put the cash down another. If they can qualify for both at the same time, it's just dependent on the situation. There's bridge loans. There's all kinds of a number of things that you could do. It just depends on your current financial situation.
Right. So, but make sure, because if you don't put that first right of refusal, then that thing will stay. And somebody else wanted to write an offer on it, there's nothing you could do.
Yeah. Definitely put that first right of refusal in.
Right. Okay. And then inspections and repairs. Well, first, what I would tell you is to go back to our previous podcast where we talk in depth about, how to work through repairs and inspections and all that stuff. So we're going to go, it's going to be a lot more detailed, but basically what I can tell you is, again, a lot of this is a preparation on the buyer and sell side about what's going to happen, right? Because that inspector is going to come through with a fine tooth comb and they're going to point out every single deficiency in the house, big or small. And we want to separate those deficiencies into one, major repairs, and the other one, deferred maintenance. And then we want to solve the big problems, and then the little problems we don't want to give a lot of weight to.
Yeah.
But regardless, the biggest thing here is going to be preparation, that they know that it's coming, that your clients know that they're going to get, your sellers know they're going to get a long list of potential things that are wrong with the house, and that the buyers know that they're going to have this extremely detailed inspection report that's going to make them go, that could potentially frighten them if they don't know about it.
Yeah, this is the biggest unknown in the process. So it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest deal killer, just because people go into it and they don't have any idea what to expect, what's going to come back from the inspection, what's actually going to be found. And they're just usually surprised. And, it could fall out any number of ways. So if it's an as-is property, you might find a number of things that you aren't comfortable with moving forward. That could kill a deal. Mm-hmm. Too many of the small things, and people get nervous about we talked about in the last podcast, deferred maintenance stuff. We kind of coach people to write that off, but people might see a number of them and get a little nervous. So it kills a lot of deals.
Yeah. That's right. So make sure, again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here. Okay. But they've got to know. They got to know that it's coming. And I would say even remind them as we're getting up to the time of the inspection, remind them that that's coming, because if you don't, they're going to forget. So, anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay. So, again, if you're kind of ready for this stuff, right? If you are If you've thought through this and you go, okay, I'm going to communicate with my clients, all of these things, I would even say, like, I don't know if we're going to do show notes for this, but I would even like take the show notes from this and build out a little buyer consultation or seller consultation so you can walk through each stage and cover these items so that they're not a surprise. That's going to be the number one thing over all of this is the communication, so that people know what to expect.
Yep.
So again, communication, the get on the same team as the other agent. Make sure that you're working with a good lender who, whether you're a sell side or buy side, make sure you're working with someone who really knows what they're doing so that doesn't become a problem later. Prepare for, or first of all, if you're listing the house, don't price it like way over comps and expect everything to go smoothly. Price it appropriately. And then if you're on the buy side, make sure you're doing your homework there as well.
There's a lot of research that's been done to say slightly under is always better than too high.
I agree. Pricing it just like a little bit under the comp. What did the comps say? It's gonna create, a little bit
More
of
interest.
more interest in it. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then on the home sale contingency, make sure you've got all of those like little detail parts worked out so that you don't, your clients don't get caught in an unfavorable situation waiting on a house to sell that is overpriced or ugly or whatever. And last, inspection repairs. And again, go back to the previous podcast. That's going to be a great one. What else? What else do we need to talk about?
I think that's it for today.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much again. Please like and subscribe. Give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And we appreciate all of you. And we'll see you next week.
Is next week 30?
Is it 30?
Episode 30?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. See
30
you next week.
episodes.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.